everybody. This is Councilwoman Emily Benedict, and we are here tonight to talk about a potential contextual overlay. It's almost an expansion. We do have some that have recently been passed and put in place just to the east of this location. Based on that, there is additional interest to put a contextual overlay in the area that you see on the map. And so tonight we're here to talk about that, understand the community's position on this, whether there is whether there's support or opposition to it, and also understand help explain what it means to the homeowners in the area. This has been headed up by sorry, Haynes, I'm Motzinger, right? Did I get that right?
You did. That's right.
All right. It's been headed up by Haynes Motzinger, who's worked with me to put this together. Matt Wilkinson from the Metro Council office is my planning expert, and he has joined us on the call. He's always attached to my hip when it comes to these types of activities, because he's been doing this a lot longer than I have. So I guess I'll go ahead and Matt, if I can turn it over to you and explain what this is and what this does.
Great. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Matt Wilkinson. As Councilman Benedict said, I am in the council office. I'm the planning and zoning liaison for that office. So I generally work with council members on things like this, as well as other stuff. But just jumping into the contextual overlay, I'm going to switch the screen from the outline.
Matt, you muted when you switch screens.
Sorry about that. So I assume a lot of you have seen this, but if you have not, if you Google contextual overlay metro planning, you'll get to go, the first thing that'll come up will be the webpage for the contextual overlay. And this is a document you can download off of that on the webpage itself. Just a couple of highlights to start off. The base zoning remains. So if you're in an R zone, which I believe this is, this does not prevent people from building duplexes. It only affects the size and the height and the lot coverage that can be done. So it will make whatever they build in line with what's already in the neighborhood. It just doesn't eliminate the two-family use. Moving on from that down to setbacks. So the minimum required setback is the average setback of your neighbors, the two on either side of you on the same block face. And so the example that they give is that if you're 50, 55, 40, and 42, the lot being redeveloped or developed on would have to have a minimum setback of 47. So it's contextual with the rest of the houses on the street. Generally, that's the standard regardless, but this overlay reinforces that by just stating it outright. I think moving on to some of the stuff I think you guys probably care a bit more about, height and lot coverage. So on height, it limits it to 35 feet or 125% of the structures on your neighbors on the two lots on either side of you, whichever is less. However, if that so let's say all of your neighbors are one-story ranch houses. So if that 125% average comes out to less than 27 feet, you're still allowed, the person building is still allowed to go up 1.5 stories and 27 feet. And this is just to provide some ability to be a bit unique, I guess, and to provide for more options without making it looming in the neighborhood. And then moving on to lot coverage, which is really the bigger restrictive. Height is a big restrictive, and then lot coverage is another big restrictor. The maximum lot coverage is 150% of the average of the coverage of the two abutting lots on each side. So let's say that the lot coverage is the lot coverage of the averages out to be 1,000 square feet. So that vacant lot or the lot that's developed and they maybe want to do an addition, they're only able to do 1,500 square feet of lot coverage. And so, and I think what came up in the previous efforts on Rosecliff, and I think even on Quarter Drive, there was some confusion related to coverage versus square footage. Lot coverage is the footprint of the house. So it's just what you have on the ground. It doesn't include like second story. So if it's like so if you have a 2-story house, that's 1,500 square feet, the lot coverage might be something like 750 square feet. It would just depend on house to house, and codes would be the ones to measure that and determine that at the time of permitting. This lot coverage does not include detached garages or accessory structures, so it's really just looking at the principal structure on the property. And so the example given by planning is if the average lot coverage of the surrounding lots is 2,100 square feet, the maximum coverage that could be done on the lot in question would be 3,150 square feet. And then moving on to what's really a little more ancillary to why a lot of people go for this, but it still affects the properties within the overlay. There's no alleyways in your neighborhoods, so you don't have to worry about the alley access. On corner lots, there's a few corner lots in the proposed area. Access will be within 30 feet of the rear property line. So this will push it back off away from the corner. You're only allowed to 1 per street frontage. So only 1 driveway access per street frontage. And that really only applies to new construction that doesn't have an existing driveway. If you have an existing curb cut, those are generally grandfathered in and allowed to remain. Parking, driveways, and all other impervious surfaces in the required setback shall not exceed 12 feet in width. As stated, similar to the curb cut, if you already have more than that, you won't have to reduce that. You just won't be able to add more to it than you already have. So it really, if you have like a 15 or 16 foot wide driveway that goes all the way down to the street, you can keep it, you just can't make it any wider or add any more within that required setback. The front garage shall be located behind the rear of the primary structure. So if you were to do a garage like a garage addition or a detached garage, or sorry, a detached garage, I'm sorry. It will need to be towards the rear of the property. You can't just put it out right next to your house. It would need to be set back behind the main house. And then finally, if you do a garage addition onto the house, the garage door would need to face the side or the rear of the property line. It could not face the street. And that's really what it is. And I think another important thing to consider as well is that these standards apply to all property within the overlay, not just new builds. So if you end up, let's say you have a big house on a small lot and your neighbors have smaller houses on bigger lots, it could work out that due to the lot coverage requirements, you may not be able to do an addition onto your home. Or like I said earlier, with the driveways, that may affect you. Or if you wanted to bump up your house and make it taller and add square footage on another floor, if the houses around you are on the shorter side of things, you might not be able to do that as well. It's just, that's an important consideration to make, is that this affects all property. It doesn't just affect developers. It doesn't just affect new builds. It affects everybody equally. And then one thing that's not in here, and that also is very important, and I'll go back to the map for this. And I'm still unmuted, so that's good. It requires a complete block face. And the block face is what you see on the east side of Preston Drive. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you have this row here that goes from Sheridan Road up, and it doesn't go all the way to Porter Road because this lot isn't a part of this, the Preston Road block face because it's oriented towards Porter Road. So only the lots oriented towards the street or are part of that block face. And that's why these lots along Porter Road were excluded. That's why some of these lots over here were included along Preston right here because this lot orients towards Sheridan Road. And so that's why the map is really drawn how it is. And so if you do make a change, and let's say that 2 or 3 people on the east side of Preston Drive decide not to participate or they want to opt out, the entire block face along the east side of Preston Drive would need to be excluded because you can't opt out and just leave the remaining homes on the drive. It's essentially all or nothing on the block face, and that's an important consideration to make. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Councilwoman Benedict.
Thank you, Matt. So those are all of the technical details, and I like to always start there so that we have that baseline of what does this mean, and we can always come back to it. So thank you, Matt, and Matt is going to be available for us the rest of this call to help answer any questions that I might not be able to answer. So just a couple of notes about this as we worked on the other two earlier in my term. You know, one of the things that I've spoken about since I ran for office is about making sure that development is happening for us rather than to us. As you look at the map, you'll see the lots, and I know you guys live with this, and I don't know if any of you actually live in any of these homes, but you'll see the lots that have 2 homes on them. And as Matt said, this isn't going to prevent 2 homes from being put on any of the lots, but it does change what those homes can look like so that you don't end up with, you know, a 45-foot home towering over your brick cottage, brick bungalow next door, which we're seeing a lot, especially, and I know that Pierman Drive is not a part of this, but we continue to see this right in this area frequently. So, you know, you've asked me to help protect our neighborhoods, and this is one of the tools in the toolkit that we have that will help us do that, to help the neighborhood look like what it looks like today. One of the pieces that's really important for us as we work together on this is making sure that we have broad support. So this meeting, well, first of all, Haynes has worked and knocked doors, and that's how folks have turned up on this call, I think, is mainly because of that, in addition to pushing it out a little bit. But you know, I really need there to be, you know, broad support for this, because this is a law. Once this is decided that we'll proceed forward, it goes through the Metro Council process. It goes through 3 readings, and it actually becomes an ordinance that puts this overlay in place. So we want to make sure that we get it right when we do it. The other part of that is, in order for me to take some legislation in front of council, if only 2 people want this and all the other homeowners don't want it, I'm going to have a very hard time going in front of my colleagues at council and trying to get this passed. So it also would not be a good thing for our neighborhood, in my opinion, if that was the way that this worked out. So I actually wouldn't even bring it. So this is about all, you know, that first conversation. We'll probably have another conversation before things are determined what direction to go. Today is about giving you the information of what this is so you can digest it, and then we'll regroup at a future time. I would like to, towards the end of this call, kind of gauge some feedback about whether there's support or not for this, just based on, again, nothing to hold you to it, but just a general, yeah, it sounds good, or no, this sounds terrible. And you can do that as anonymously as we'll figure out a way to do that if we can. You know, some folks, usually the concerns that come up have to do with, you know, going back to, this is an ordinance, becomes law, this is permanent. So once it's in place, we can't undo it. And so that means that it transfers with every ownership of every property. As people buy and sell the homes in the area, these restrictions remain in place. And then people have questions about, what does that do for the value of their property? And I'm going to take off my council hat for just a second, because I think most of you know that I'm a residential realtor, and the homes that you live in this area are the core part of my business. Not in Inglewood, I don't sell very much here at all, but I typically am selling houses in the $250,000 to $350,000 price range, and these are the homes I love to sell. These are, you know, the what I like about Nashville is the way that we have these homes. So, but I will tell you, with the realtor hat on, is that pricing is in the eyes of the beholder. So I'm gonna now put this is being recorded, and I'm glad to have that out there. But I want to put my council hat back on and tell you that as a council member, again, value is in the eyes of the beholder, but also this, we can't tell whether it changes the value or not. That really is, again, up to what somebody would like to pay for the home should you want to sell. To some people, this really adds value. This means that you're not going to have somebody next door to you building that towering giant, looking down into your home. For other people, they say, I want to be able to build as much as possible on my lot, and this is going to restrict me from doing that. So it's going to be less valuable for me. At the end of the day, though, the value is not the reason for doing this. The reason for doing this really is community feel, making sure that the fabric of the neighborhood is kept, if that's what the community wants. Now, if you look down Sheridan, as I know you guys all know, if you look to the right of the outline and you look down Sheridan to the right of Preston, to the east of Preston, every single one of those lots has 2 homes on them, and they're typically big homes, not necessarily all super tall, but they're big homes. If we were to put a contextual overlay in that area, the context are tall skinnies there. So the idea would be that the context of any future developments would look like what's there today. So I also want to kind of put that in your mind, that if this isn't put in place, that can happen. That could happen right now anyway. So it's again, neither here nor there. It's just information I want you to be thinking about as you determine what direction you'd like to go. From a process perspective, and then we'll open it up for questions. From a process perspective, again, this is just the initial meeting. I would always want to have a second meeting, and then from there, if the community wants to proceed with this, then we file this with the Planning Commission, and mailers get sent out and signs get put up in the area, and then it goes through the Planning Commission, and then it goes in front of the council for 3 readings. And once it's passed there, then it becomes the law effective immediately. And any additional permits after that date, any additional permits that get filed for building or demolition of anything, will have to follow the regulations of the overlay. So that can take, usually around 3 months for the whole thing, soup to nuts. So again, if we decide that we want to proceed here in the next, 2 to 4 weeks, then we'd be looking at probably about 3 to 4 months for this to get put in place. So with that, I will open it up for questions. And I don't know if you should have a raised hand function. If not, let's just go ahead and let's keep it simple. If you want to just go ahead and jump in, go ahead.
Sorry, and also if you are on the app or on your computer, you can also use the chat feature, and we can look at those chats as well.
Oh, perfect. All right, Haynes, it looks like you've got your hand up first, and then Emily, I see you next.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Cassie talking. I'm Haynes' partner. This was really informative and useful. I just wanted to ask for a little bit of clarification about what broad support looks like, and if there are multiple modes of support that can express support for this cause. And what I mean by that is these calls are really awesome, and I'm very grateful for them. But we did have several neighbors who said, that sounds great. We talked to them by the phone. They said, I'm happy to sign something, a petition or something like that, but I'm not really going to attend any meetings. And so I'm just wondering if there's kind of a multiple modes that we can package support if we were able to get it.
Great question. And, for me, it's understanding that. And, Haynes, or Cassie, you guys have been working on this for a while. So, and we built a relationship up. I know a number of folks that live right here. That's the job, right? And so I trust that, the information that's coming to me is accurate. Certainly as much as possible that you can document is what I really need to see, what I really prefer to see. Once the notification goes out that it identifies that there's a public hearing at the Planning Commission, they're also at the second reading of the bill, or depending on the timing of it, the first meeting of the month, the council meetings of the month, there's a public hearing there as well. And so notifications go out for that, and we usually will have people show up. Well, and in this case, people call in support or opposition. And so that's really where you can come to me all day and say, here's I'm guessing at the number here, of the 40 homes that are involved in this, here's 20 signatures that are of support. The other 20 we don't know, or whatever it might be, right? From there, that helps me understand, okay, there's good support for this. Let's go ahead and go through the process and get it filed. And then when we get to the public hearing, people will call in and let the Planning Commission know if they're for it or against it. And based on that, then I'll also be able to gauge, that. And if there's more opposition, I'm pretty democratic about things. With this type of a bill, I'm real supportive of putting these in place. I think it's the right thing for our neighborhoods to, especially this deep in the neighborhood, to keep the fabric of it as it is today. So those public hearings really are where we'll gauge support or opposition for it.
Thank you so much.
All right. And if you could put your hand down, that would be helpful. Awesome. All right, Emily Ritter, you're up. You're up next.
Hi, thanks for meeting with us today and for giving us all this information. I have a question on the technicality of the overlay itself, and so maybe this is a question for you or for Matt. But what does the overlay imply about tearing down perfectly good houses in order to develop? So all of the rules that I saw in the overlay are about what you can build and what you can't build, but not about what you can and can't tear down. So can you give me some information on that?
Yeah, great question. Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah. The contextual overlay does not prohibit or regulate demolition. It only regulates new construction and addition. When you start looking at wanting to regulate demolition, that's when you need to start looking at historic overlays, like the historic conservation overlay, which has certain requirements about the age of the homes within the area, and some other things that the Historic Commission looks at when they're looking at placing those overlays. So this is this does not affect demolition.
Emily, I feel your pain though.
Thank
I
you.
hear
We're
you.
in that little corner house that's just had something torn down next door, and we're really sad about it.
I used to live over on Hayden, not far from this spot, and I sold my house in 2005, and it's the owners finally sold it, I think about 2018 or so, and there's 2 homes there now. But so I get it, and I miss driving by and seeing my little ranch there.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And this is a follow-up to that question that was in the chat from Cassie Dorf. Have y'all seen evidence of a slowdown on demolishing good condition homes in areas with these kinds of overlays? I don't go to this part of East Nashville a whole heck of a lot since I live over on the west side of town, but I'm sure Councilmember Benedict has been over there so she can see.
That's a great question. These overlays have not been in place for very long. One of them just passed, I believe, in December. And the other one that prior to that was maybe I'm going to guess, Matt, maybe August or September, somewhere in there. So we haven't seen as far as in our area specifically, I can't answer that question because it's just so recent. Around the city, Matt, can you speak to what you see around the city, if this has had any impact on that, to your knowledge?
So I guess I'm just going to preface this and like just say when I'm driving around, I don't really know when I'm driving through a contextual overlay or not. And a lot of these older contextual overlays were before my time at Metro. I've only been at Metro since the start of 2013. But I will say that the limitation on lot coverage and building height does significantly diminish the development of the land from a developer's context. So if there's lots in the area that are not a part of the overlay that are available, they will probably gravitate towards those prior to trying to do some in the contextual. And that's not to say that they won't come to a contextual area. I have seen examples of duplexes built in the contextual overlay after the contextual overlay was adopted. But it's more of a supply side build, like if you're going to spend your money, spend it in a place that doesn't have the extra thing you have to do type thing. So that's something that we would probably find more about in the next 5 or 6 years once these more of these newer contextual overlays.
All right, thanks, Matt. Bob, I see your question in the chat. I'm going to first go to Elizabeth because she's had her hand up.
Thank you so much, and thank you for meeting with us. I'm curious, I just was wondering, I didn't get a chance to see what it said in the Contextual Overlay document earlier about garages, that the front of any detached garage shall be located behind the rear of the, that's so it's not seen from the street? Is that the purpose of that? I'm just curious because I understand that any existing structure is grandfathered in, but mean that if you want to do any alterations to an existing structure, if it doesn't fit within the contextual overlay, then are you unable to do it?
So you, when on the existing structure, you can make updates to it. You just can't make it more non-conforming. So if the garage already exists in the fashion that it does, you don't have to tear it down, and you can continue to update it and even refresh it to a certain degree under the auspices of state law, which protects legally non-conforming structures, which is what that would become.
Right.
So when you're building like a new detached garage and you're already in the overlay, it really just puts it towards the back of the lot to keep it from dominating the house.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's sort of like what you see in a more traditional neighborhood, where the detached garages were always towards the rear of the property.
Yeah.
Being up front, sort of like what you would see in a newer suburban development where it's like the garage and they have like a little door off to the side that you go around the garage to get to the house.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much for that, for answering. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right, Matt, will you take Bob's question? Bob's question in the chat is basically, well, it's just, aren't a lot of older homes, older existing homes historic, since this was one of the first early 1950 homes as part of the post-war boom? Do you want to talk about the qualifications for an historic overlay and how that works?
Okay, I don't have that in front of me right now, but I do know that it's 50 to be considering historically contributing. The homes have to be at least 50 years in age or older. I do know that there are some other things that they look at as well, sort of like, are there enough of them left to sort of, especially in this context where you may not have an individual home or a small collection that might be significant on their own. So you're looking at more of like the context of the neighborhood as being like a significant representation. Would be something that I could look at and send that to Councilwoman Benedict, and she can send it out to you when I have a chance to bring all that stuff up. I apologize. I just only have one screen in front of me right now, and I have all the meetings going right now, so I can't bring that up.
I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat just to the General Historic Commission guidelines. There are a ton of links on that page, so enjoy for, you know, a late night insomnia session. I can have, Matt can send me more specifics about that.
And I'll just follow up. If you have questions like this, you can always reach out to the Metro Historic Commission. Robin Ziegler or one of the people that work under her are more than happy to talk with you for however long you may want to talk about historic stuff because they really like doing that. And they can guide you through what that process would look like if that's the direction you want to go in. And then we can circle back around and go that direction if it qualifies and if they think that there's an opportunity to move forward there. So that's really sort of their purview. And
Well, and Riverwood Mansion, you know, is not far. So, you know, that kind of ties in a little bit with the historic angle. Another option would be, Bob, I'm going to call on you because I see you can't raise your hand, but another option would be a conservation overlay. And that's more restrictive, but that's something that also is something we could look at. And I don't know if we want to touch on that at all or not right now. Let's go ahead and go back to the questions and then we may do that. Bob, can you unmute and answer your question?
Yeah. Basically, all the homes in this area were built in 1952, and as I understand it, they were built on land that had been part of the Riverwood plantation, and this area was called Porter Flats. Like every house on my street was built in like 51, 52, and 53. And it was a part of that post-war VA loan-induced subdivision that went all across the country.
Yeah, it's such a great area that, you know, as things continue to change and we grow in density, you know, there's a lot of that happening in this area. And I think for folks that have lived there for a long time, like I've been in the neighborhood 22 years. I lived there a long time ago. Bob, I know you've been in the neighborhood a while. You know, I think this is again one of those tools in the toolkit that will help us, but there are other tools. And so if you know, historic is something we want to look at, we can. The conservation overlay is something we want to look at, we can. Or if we want to do the contextual overlay or nothing, you know, these are all tools that I want to make sure you understand we can have, and it is a great history right there.
Also, I was separate from historic or conservation overlay. Matt, is there any way to work in design performance standards that might benefit any person that wants to do something in terms of that they add certain features? Like, I know a lot of the new homes seem to have the same, like, I don't know what you call it, certain of the same design aspects as existing homes. Not all of them, but a lot of them do, in terms of the way the pitch of the roof and all that stuff.
I think, Matt, would that be the conservation overlay? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
now?
I can. So really, there is and there isn't. There's something called the urban design overlay, which is sort of a build your own overlay, but planning is very hesitant to do those anymore, especially on an area this small, because it takes so much work to make them and then enforce them. And planning has to write those themselves. And I think there is a 3-year outlay of projects that they're working on now. So that if you wanted to go that direction, it would probably take at least 2, probably a full 3 or 4 years before you could get something that they would be able to work on, just because they have so many requests right now. The conservation overlay is also a form of a historic overlay. It's just the less restrictive of the two. You have a conservation overlay and you have a preservation overlay. And a conservation overlay is really looking more at preventing demolition, and there's some design aspects in it as well. And so when you want to do like an infill, or you want to do an addition, or you want to tear something down, you have to go before the Metropolitan Historic Zoning Commission for approval. A preservation overlay generally will have its own standalone guidelines that are written specifically for it, and it goes into way more detail. I think the Germantown has a historic preservation overlay that's pretty detailed. There's some more around town in some more residential areas. That's just the one that came off the top of my head.
Yeah, and what I'll tell you is the link that I put in the chat, if you scroll down on that webpage, you'll see areas where these are. We have a couple within the district. We actually have 3 within the district. So if you want, you can open it. It provides a PDF if you click on it. Inglewood Place would be the one nearest you. And so if you, again, click that link, go to that page, scroll down, and you'll see Inglewood Place NCZO. That stands for Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. And
Yes.
as you scroll through that 35-page document, you'll see what that means. And that's what we're talking about when we say a conservation overlay.
Yeah, and okay, there we go. And I just want to jump in real quick, as because I think I forgot to mention this. Unfortunately, this overlay can't be edited. So I know that came up in the previous stuff where they wanted to like maybe take something out or add something in. And the way that the overlay was written and adopted by council, it's sort of a take it or leave it thing. With this overlay in particular, it just has to be adopted how it's drafted. So like all of these requirements are required when you come into it.
Yeah, you can't, it's an all or nothing here on the conservation, I'm sorry, on the contextual overlay. All right, Cassie, your hand is up. Not sure if that's Cassie or Haynes.
It's Haynes, and I just wanted to share as kind of a point of information about this conversation about historic overlays and conservation overlays. Before, at the very start of this process, I had reached out to Robin Ziegler, actually at Metro Historic Zoning Commission, to ask her for guidance and expressing that a number of neighbors were interested in this. And we had a couple of long conversations, and she strongly encouraged us to pursue the contextual overlay just because of former experiences that she had had. And just thinking about what our strongest case was for this neighborhood, I would be more than happy outside of the context of this meeting to share that correspondence with any neighbors who are interested. But the reason why I reached out to you, Councilmember Benedict and Matthew, is because of that guidance from Robin and the Historic Zoning Commission. So I just wanted to share that, to offer up that we did try to gain information about that, and we're steered in this direction for our neighborhood in particular.
Thank you for that. And by the way, everybody, I'm your neighbor, so, and I work for you, so please call me Emily. I appreciate the respect, but you can call me Emily. So speaking of Emily's, we'll go to Emily Ritter. You're back up.
Emily is Unite. So my question was partially answered by Haynes, I think, but so to make sure that I'm understanding this conversation correctly, it seems like the possible tools we can choose from are a contextual overlay, a conservation overlay, a historic overlay, and us talking about a contextual overlay today doesn't preclude us from doing one of the others. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's correct.
But we're talking about this because this is what Haynes has decided to start the conversation with on the basis of the advice that you received, correct, Haynes?
That's right.
Okay. Okay, but we can still like collectively decide on something else if that's something we decide that would work better for us.
It's not only my decision.
Yeah. No. I know. I'm just doing. I understand. Okay, thank you.
You bet. These are all great questions, and these are the questions that come up, in every conversation. So, these are we try to cover everything, but there's always things we miss, and so there's no dumb questions here. Especially when you ask Matt a question. I ask him dumb questions all the time, and he's very respectful and kind. So you guys can ask away. We're here to help you decide what you'd like to do with your property. Are there any other questions at this point? And then is there maybe I want people to be anonymous if you want to be anonymous, but I see either Haynes or Cassie that you have your hand up again, but
Sorry.
One sec. What I'd like to do before we wrap up, if everybody's okay with this, and if you're not, that you don't need to do it, but if you are inclined to support this right now, I'm not going to hold you to it. Neighbors, you're not allowed to hold these folks to it, but if you, based on what we've talked about today, if this sounds like something you want to continue to pursue or continue to learn about, if you'd raise your hand so I can just kind of get a quick count of what that looks like, that'd be very helpful for me. In the meantime, I see the hands going up, but Haynes and Cassie, you're up.
Yeah, our neighbor Laura has a question, but wasn't able to raise her hand. I think maybe is on phone, and same with Melissa. Oh wait, no, Melissa doesn't have a question. Okay, sorry. Laura, should we cue you in? Okay.
I think Laura's going to
Okay,
take first
sorry.
question.
Oh,
Oh.
go ahead.
So this is, so basically I'm just going to ask you a contextual overlay for dummies question. Is this, in like, just to dumb it down, this is really to protect us from a bunch of tall skinnies going up, right?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. All on board. Thank you.
Yeah, basically what it means is that if I live next door to you and I live in a brick ranch, as we said, I could technically demo that house, but what I build back there, and even if I want to build two, I can build two based on the zoning in the area, but they have to look more like what your house looks like today. They can't be those tall skinnies.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like, you know, so some good support for the folks that are on the call, and I appreciate that. I suspect that there's folks that are still, you know, minds not made up. And you know, this is one thing I always want to caution folks about. This is your neighbors, and you're going to still be neighbors no matter how this, you know, however this goes through, whether it gets passed or not. So I just want to, you know, let you know that, you know, remember that, and this one size does not fit all, but we all want to do the best that we can to, you know, create the best neighborhood. And so that also means that for the folks that oppose it, they're doing what they believe is the best thing for the neighborhood. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that. We don't, you know, we just want to continue to be respectful of each other. We've had some situations where that hasn't occurred. So I would just encourage you to be civil, have a conversation, and, you know, like what we're doing today. I see two more hands up. I just want to see if those are questions or if they're left over, as we say in council meetings. Are those leftover virtual hands, or are they actual questions? So we'll go to Cassie and then Charlie.
Yeah.
So we have two questions. One is from Lauren Valentine, who can't, she's on her phone. She texted it to us, and she asked, is there a way to find out how many demo permits have been issued in this overlay but haven't yet been built? If it takes 3 months to get the overlay, how many houses could we lose in the process?
Yeah, so there is a way. There is Codes has a tool where you can look up permits once they're issued. We don't know, obviously, if somebody's going to go ask for a permit, we don't know that they're going to go ask it until they actually have gone and asked or applied for it. I will say that, you know, down in Rosecliff, there was a home that had been demolished during the middle of the overlay process as the legislation was going through council. However, no permit had been issued to build something new in its place. The overlay passed before any permits were issued. I don't know now what has happened with that property, if somebody did, if they are building something there or not, but regardless, whatever it is that they're building there now has to meet the guidelines of the contextual overlay. So the question there is, you know, it's an open market, so people can, if landowners can do what they're allowed to do under the law, and you can lose some, but the likelihood of someone coming in and saying, hey, this is about to happen, let's buy up all this land and wipe them all out, I've not seen that happen. And that would, you know, that would really take a concerted effort from some group that would have a nefarious interest, in my mind, to do that. So
and one more kind of related question is just, what is the accountability process? So say our neighborhood was to get this contextual overlay established. What is the process for ensuring that a developer who says buys a house and demos it builds within the confines of the overlay? Is that through the permitting process, or how does that work?
So once the overlay becomes effective, it becomes a part of the zoning code. And so when a builder or somebody doing an addition on their house goes to pull a permit, it'll be flagged that it's in a contextual overlay, and a zoning examiner will review the plans for compliance with the code. And they'll look at things like lot coverage, building height, and whatnot. And then they won't issue the permits until the plans they approve, until they approve plans that meet the overlays requirements.
If I may add one thing to that as well, and this comes up from time to time, it's rare. It's come up maybe 3 times in the past year. Sometimes somebody builds something that, sometimes a contractor comes in and they're following the plans and oops, they built it higher than they're supposed to. Neighbors have called me and said, this looks too high. This doesn't fit. And we get codes right out there and, they put a stop work order in place until they can figure out, are the plans correct or not and what happened. That happens, again, that happens all over the city and we'll get codes right out. It's not very frequent because, to Matt's point, once the plans are filed, they're followed very closely. The only time that they're not followed is if some contractor makes a mistake like that. And also, as codes is coming out and looking, how is the wiring? Was the HVAC, how's the insulation, or whatever the steps are that codes does as they come out and do their inspections for plumbing and for electrical and such, those things are being looked at as well.
We have 2 Callins. Their numbers end in 4-3 and 4-7.
That's Laura Valentine and Joe Perry. John Perry. They can't. John Perry just called me on my cell phone to say that's who that is, and Laura Valentine is the 4-7 number.
If they want to speak, I believe they can unmute themselves, or I can request them to unmute, and I should prompt them to unmute if they would like. So I'll request to unmute 4-3 if they would like to speak. And then if they don't, we can move on to 4. So I just like to do this to give everybody an opportunity, because sometimes we have meetings where we have 10 or 12 call-ins like this, and there's no way I know who they are. So I have to just unmute and ask if they want to ask a question. And then I guess we'll move on to 4-7 just to see if they want to.
And I
Hello.
see in the, sorry, go ahead.
4-3, 4-3, you're unmuted so you can speak.
I'm 4-7.
Oh, so just go ahead and speak. I'm sorry. Who are you? I'm sorry.
Mr. Perry, I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, I had trouble getting on, but I'm finally here. Now, whatever happens to protect our property, I am for it. I've lived out here 30-something years, so I can just say something needs to be done for the protection of the property. So that's basically what I wanted to say. And
I
just
appreciate
keep me abreast of what's going on.
100%. You got it.
I live
Thank you
here
for that.
on Harwood Drive, so
I know where you are. Go down the street and on the right.
yes. Yeah, I live on Harwood.
All right. Thanks so much for voicing your support. We appreciate that.
Yes, yes.
All right, Matt, do you want to unmute the other line, or request to unmute rather?
Yeah, so I sent the request. I used to be able to actually unmute people, and then they took that ability away in an update. So.
Okay. Well, it looks like there's good support for this and or continue the discussion. So I really appreciate folks joining tonight, learning about this, being engaged in the process. I guess from a next step perspective, what I'd like to see is the neighborhood, debrief kind of together. And for those who support this, if you want to, you've got more information now. So for anybody that that isn't able to make the call but has an interest or maybe had questions for you, I kind of lean on you to be the captain in the neighborhood to help continue to get the word out. And then I'll just wait to hear back from you as far as next steps, and we'll have a subsequent meeting to answer any additional questions and see if anybody else is who wasn't able to attend tonight can join the subsequent meeting, and then from there determine whether to proceed or whether to proceed or not. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the call. Again, I appreciate everybody being here, and you know how to reach me, emily.benedict@nashville.gov, and let me know if you have any questions. You can do it that way if you want to keep it more confidential as well. again, appreciate everybody being here. Please stay safe, wear a mask, stay apart, and get a vaccine when you're eligible. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Thank you.